Thursday. And for those of you that didn't get it, it's probably because we're targeting anybody who is 3/4 capper or less. We'd like for you guys to come, tell us what you are looking for to help increase your business, to better your business, so that we can help you get that one extra deal that might push you up to being a capper or a half capper or whatever your goals might be. So come on Thursday, 10 o'clock. We're going to kind of separate everybody by level of production so that we're, targeting each individual production level and see what we can do to get you to get into business. The other thing we have is we want to announce that we have found a new agent services director. Many of y'all probably know her, but Judy Regal. She'll be coming on board Monday of next week, and she's going to help us with just new hire paperwork. She'll be scheduling orientations. She's going to help us with projected closings, agent bills, and she's also going to help us in the times where we get really busy and backed up with compliance. In the event that you have already sent your file in for compliance and we just need one or two things, Judy will be able to help us go in and clear some of those things. So it's going to help us significantly, I hope, so that we can keep compliance down to a minimum. So, anyway.
I'll have a list.
But anyway, so we're happy to have her come on board, and y'all stop by and say hi to her, and if you haven't met her, come do so. No.
Only
So
some
you're on
people.
the list. We already know you're on the list.
Well,
Just know
we
it.
know who's on the list.
Okay, so getting control. I moved some people up to the front row.
Oh, I see.
So, many of you not know the name Wendy McFarland, right? This is the person that does compliance. I was told a couple of people, it's really interesting when I'm talking to new people and I go, and we have a compliance person, and they check to make sure everything is right, they all go, oh, good. And then they have to get it through compliance, and now it's like, compliance, So we wanted to kind of address that issue today, and I wanted you to meet Wendy, and we're going to talk about some compliance tips and how to get things smoothly through compliance so it's a win-win for everybody. So Wendy, would you say, this is Wendy McFarland. Can we just say welcome, Wendy? I'm going to start by going through the compliance list.
Yeah, I just wanted to say a couple of things.
Okay.
And we'll go over that, and then I'll be happy to answer any questions that y'all may have. But I just wanted to let you guys know that I'm on your side. I mean, we're here to help you. We're all here to help you. So I know how tough your job is. You're on the go. You're in the car. You're on the phone. You've got clients calling. Probably just about the time you sit down to dinner, the phone rings and you've got to write an offer. Or you're on the way to soccer practice and somebody wants to see a house across town. I mean, I get it. I mean, it's a wonder you'll have time to get anything done. So just wanted to let you know that, and we'll get through this. It's not really it's not hard to get anything through compliance, but we're on your side, and I'm just here to make sure that nothing falls through the cracks. So I just made up a list of things that are pretty common, things that I see quite often. And the first thing is you can have as many folders as you want to in DocNote, but when you're ready to submit something to compliance, put your listing docs in one folder and your buyer docs in another folder. And the reason for that is different things are needed for each set of circumstances. So it just makes it easier for us to get through the file quicker and get it on out of the way back to you quicker. Remember to submit for review after you've added a requested doc. We have no way of knowing that a document has been added until it's submitted for review, which puts it into my queue. So anytime you look in your loop and it says compliance review, it's in my queue waiting for me to get to it. When I'm looking at my queue, if If I show what that looks like. Oh, okay.
I have a question for you.
Uh-huh.
Do you sleep ever?
Oh.
I get emails from you all.
I know.
I answer to.
So
I'm
I
not
work
sleeping
during the day as a transaction coordinator, and then I have a little dinner break, and then I work on my files
Okay.
at night. Sometimes when it's slow during the day, I can get a few files in, but mainly I do work in the evening. So this is what my queue looks like. These ones with the asterisks, I haven't looked at them yet, but this one here, maybe I've opened it up for some reason. What I wanted to point out on this is that you can add in your loop, you can add your closing date, and that kind of helps me prioritize. So if I'm looking at this, I don't know what's closing when, because none of these have a closing date on them. So it's all fine and good if I only have 4 or 5 things in the queue, which is hardly ever. I mean, they're usually quite a few. But it's helpful if I have a lot of files to go through. It's helpful to know which ones are closing first.
So how do they add a closing date?
I see it right there.
Like this
Okay.
one doesn't have it, so
Yeah,
how would it be added to this? I mean,
Okay,
at what
so
point do
just-
they add the closing date?
Just pick, okay, so here's you're gonna hit your drop down. This is a listing for lease. It's an active listing. Actually, you can't add you have to show that it's under contract. So where it says active listing, change that to under contract. And this one, it happens to be a lease, so it's gonna say occupancy date instead of a closed date.
But it's still generally the same thing.
It'll generally the same thing. So we can just fill in a date, you can put any date, and I'll go back and fix it.
USB.
But anyway, you see where to do it, and what it'll do is it'll add a date on here for me.
If you were just to put it on the details page though, would that show up there? There's a place on the details page that has all those
I
details.
don't know, that's a good question.
Yeah. Should we go there?
You know what, I think it does. I
Okay.
think it does. Because sometimes when I change them myself, even if you haven't done it, I'll go in for my own benefit, I'll change them. And sometimes as soon as you show that it's under contract, that date will populate.
Wendy, will you show them, because a lot of times people come and they ask, what's the status of their compliance?
Uh-huh.
But on this screen right here, see on the right, on the left-hand side where it says compliance review, that is where we know that it's in the queue. If it still says return to agent compliance not met, but you've uploaded your stuff, it's because you've not hit the submit to review button. That little thing will change as soon as you submitted it. So a lot of times people upload their stuff and then they say, well, I haven't gotten a response. If that little button doesn't say compliance review, then you didn't submit it.
And then if it does happen to say return to agent, you can go up to your messages in the upper, and you don't have to open that, but your messages will either be there, or you can also go to the activity log and kind of scroll down, and your messages will be there also. You can actually look at a couple of different places for them. So, good? Okay. Another thing about messages, I won't see your messages until I open up the file for review. So if you have something that's time sensitive, you're closing in a couple of days, and whatever it is, just email me, because I monitor my emails all the time. But the messages, I won't see them until I open up the file, and then it's like, oh, they're closing early, So, okay. Once a file is met compliance, whether it's in listing completed or ready for green sheet, there's no need to submit the file again for review unless you need a DA revision. So if there's an amendment or you're just adding maybe a tower commitment or whatever it happens to be, you don't need to submit it for review. Once you submit for review for final compliance, I'll see all those docs anyway, and I can go through and check them off. Please submit your listing docs as soon as the listing goes live. You can submit your listing docs as a pre-listing if you're just waiting on the MLS to go active. Because that's a quick and easy fix, I don't mind looking at those at all. Seller's disclosures, okay. This is probably the biggest things if all gets returned for, I would say. And it doesn't matter if you're on the listing side or the buying side, please make sure that the seller has answered all of the questions. And if you're on the buying side, same thing. If you're handed a set of disclosures that aren't filled out or halfway filled out or kind of missing some key questions, like have you ever had inspections before, please go back and ask the other agent for them. It's important. It's important for your client. I would think a buyer would like to know if there's been any previous inspections. They might be curious about what that inspection report might indicate. And I cannot tell you how many times I've asked for that, and lo and behold, there's been an inspection. Same thing like on the on flood insurance. If they answer yes to having flood insurance, the disclosure does say, please attach the TAR 1414. And so that's one thing I'm looking for. If they've answered yes, then that form needs to be attached as well.
Yeah, so another thing is on the back of the form that you have, there's a list of when a seller's disclosure is not required. So I don't know why it seems that people think, well, if they buy it as an investment property, they've never lived there, there's no seller's disclosure. That's not true. That's not true. They still have to have a seller's disclosure. There are 11 reasons why somebody does not have to have a seller's disclosure, and they're listed on the back of your sheet, on the compliance tip sheet. The 11 things that people do not have to have a seller's disclosure. And the fact that they've never lived in the house is not one of them. They need to make sure that they've got their seller's disclosure done. So, so you can keep that handy, and when another agent tries to tell you that, oh, they've never lived there, there's no seller's disclosure, you can say not true. I took that right out of the book.
It's an estate, that's the same thing.
What's that, Teresa?
Estate, if it's in an estate and the kids have never lived there.
Right, then they don't have, yeah.
Well,
The state is,
I was making them sign it, and just saying, in an estate by the.
I think that, and let me, I think if it's an estate property, it's been inherited by the family, it's not required. But if the family knows something about the home, I think that's a great tool to give the potential buyers. It's not required, but they have that information and they know information about the home. We never get in trouble for disclosing too much, do we? We get in trouble when we don't disclose, and it's when, they might know that there's a foundation issue in the house, but they don't have to fill out a seller's disclosure, so they're not going to say anything. And then the buyer finds out there's a foundation issue, and they go, oh, they knew about it. So what else aren't they telling me? How often have we had that happen over and over again? Buyers, once something like that pops up, the buyer loses that faith in the seller and thinks that they're not being honest and truthful with them. So you never get in trouble for disclosing too much. That's my.
I just want to know if it's the estate selling and the seller never lived in the property, I'm going to verify all this information.
Yeah, you can do that too.
It's safer to do that.
You can do that too. And then just to kind of hone in on every question being answered, really. So if you take the listing, make sure you look, and I think probably and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think page 1, at the side where it talks about how many units are there when it comes to air conditioning, how many water heaters, how many, where is the sprinkler system, what part of the yard is covered with the sprinkler system. I think those are the questions that are missed the most often.
Those are missed the most often, and just think about things like the garage door remotes. They've got 2 openers, 2 openers that the buyer shows up and there's 1 remote. Well, you go back and look, did it say 1, did it say 2? Oh, we've always had 1. I mean, those are things that if you fill them out, avoid problems in the future. And remember too, unknown, that's an acceptable answer. It's okay that they don't know the answer.
But they just have to say,
They just have to say, I don't know.
Yeah, exactly.
So,
And then just make sure you protect your buyer. If you've got a buyer, don't allow them to sign that seller's disclosure if everything's not building. It's really important. That's how you protect your buyer. And I'll just tell you a quick little story I had one time where they moved in the house and electrical, it was a vacant house when they moved in. It had been vacant for a few months. They moved in and the electrical wasn't working, so they called an electrician. He says, well, this house has been hit by lightning. So it is very expensive to have it all taken care of. So they then call their the insurance company and they go, oh, it was a pre-existing condition. We're not covering it. So then they went to the home warranty company and they said, it's an act of God. We're not covering it. How would you like to be that buyer's agent? Because when I went back to the seller's disclosure and looked at it, guess what was it? There were pieces of the seller's disclosure that would have addressed that issue that weren't answered. And so it's our job to protect our buyers that way and make sure that everything's on there. So we're not trying to be overly picky or making it hard. We just want to make sure that you're protected, that everybody's protected in this, and that you're really doing the best job for your buyers and your sellers that you can. And the seller's disclosure is probably the #1 thing that gets sent back, and because things aren't checked. And I can promise you that the seller, how often have you seen it come back and it's like the seller has forgot to mark something, and it's because they didn't really want to disclose it. They didn't want to tell it. So it's our job when we have the buyer to make sure that everything is marked on there, so we're protecting our buyer and they have all the information they need.
And one thing, even the very first question on occupancy, you think it's such a minor thing. You can obviously tell if someone's living in the house, maybe you can, maybe you can't, but it gives the buyer a perspective. Is this person answering these disclosures because they've lived in the house for 15 years or they've never lived in it? It kind of gives the buyer an idea of what they're dealing with as far as the information that's provided. Okay, we already talked about the people that are exempt. Thank you for putting that list out. Okay, T47s, I do return those quite a bit. Number one, they're required for the contract. If you've chosen option 3 on the, let's pick that up. Can you put the contract up there? I mean, excuse me, option number 1.
I would make it look at that.
At the time of the listing.
They're part of the certain areas that I don't want.
It's like there's a.
It's not too big of a deal.
Okay, there it is. Yeah, so if you've chosen option 1 on the survey, and just gonna have the extra number of days filled in, the seller is to provide both the survey and the T47 within those number of days. If you're the seller and you don't provide that in that time limit, the buyer is entitled to a brand new survey at the seller's expense. It's $400 or $500, maybe more if it's acreage. So that's something that's real important, and it's a date that you need to be mindful of. So if that box is selected, number 1, that's one of the things I'm going to be looking for, the survey and the T47. And the T47 needs a date filled in at question 4. And then it also asks the seller to note any changes to the property. If they haven't made any changes to the property, no fences have been removed, no patios, anything like that, then they should write in none. And the form tells you that. It tells you to write in none. Otherwise, what are they signing? What are they attesting to? If you've left that blank. So that will save lots of trouble. The last thing you want to do is get to closing and the teller company find out. You know, they're just casually talking at the table and you're like, oh yeah, we had to move that fence a couple of weeks ago or a couple of months ago or whatever. You don't want to cause issues. You want that out, you know, out in the open in a timely manner so it can be addressed.
I have a question on that.
Uh-huh.
If you've got a survey and you know it's not going to pass,
Mm-hmm.
okay, because there's been some changes on it, why do I need a T47 that I know that's not going to pass? Okay.
I totally get it. So in that case, you don't, yeah.
I only submit it for information purposes only so they can kind of see how the house is on the property and things like that.
Okay, so a couple of things. If it's your listing, you know on the part on the seller's disclosures where it says seller has or has not attached a survey?
Right.
If they say I've attached a survey, whether it's going to be good or not good at this point is not really relevant, but if they've attached a survey, then I'm going to be looking for the survey and the T47 because that's what our broker has asked for. If you're on the buying side and now this is under contract, again, whether or not the survey is going to be good or not, if option 1 is selected per the contract, you're required to give it. So in that case, maybe option 2 or number 3 should have been chosen on the contract itself. But if option 1 is chosen, we have no choice but to ask for it. Now, what you can do is when I've asked you for the T47 and it's maybe a couple weeks into the deal and you've already well, let me back up a little bit. If I've reviewed the file and we are within that date, time period where it should have been provided as per the contract, I'm gonna be looking for it. But if it's a little bit further down the line, it's already been, looked at by the title company and you already know it's not gonna be any good, just send me a note. We're gonna have to get a new survey. It's, you know, it's got to be in the file, otherwise we're gonna be looking for it. So that would be the only reason I would think that we
So if they
wouldn't
have
need it.
a survey, it's just for informational purposes, like Herman said, on the seller's disclosure, they should write that there is not.
That there is not a
that there is no
survey.
survey.
Is
There
that what
isn't
you mean
a-
by attached, if they write yes and have one? then
Yes,
you
it's
want
in
to see
section
one?
6.
Right, I got you.
Yeah. Does that answer, does that sound right, Ruth? To what you would want?
Well, if you know that it's not gonna pass, why do I need the 247? Okay, so in other words, they should just mark they don't have a survey.
Right.
Correct?
Right.
And then on the contract, choose option 2 or 3. Don't
Right.
take option 1.
And
Right.
that'll help your buyers agents too, especially if you posted things online on MLS. They already know when they write up an offer, seller doesn't have a survey, or even if they have one, it's not gonna be good, so someone's gonna have to pay for a survey. So that can be part of, you know, maybe help the negotiations go a little bit better.
Always put in
So.
agent marks that the survey is months.
Okay, lead-based paint addendum, I'm kind of particular on this as well, because this is based on a federal guideline, and the broker has a responsibility to make sure that this is filled out correctly. And it's a simple form, but all of the questions need to be answered. The buyer has to acknowledge whether they've received that pamphlet, are they gonna have inspections? If you represent the buyer, make sure that you have given that pamphlet to the buyer. Don't just make them sign something that they've seen it. Make sure that you've actually shared that pamphlet with them. The seller should actually sign the form first and answer those first 2 questions, whether they have any knowledge of any lead in the home. And then that way, when the buyer signs, they are answering their questions based on what information the seller has provided. So I'm always looking for all of those questions to be answered, and both agents need to sign and both parties need to sign.
I have one more question. I'm
Uh-huh.
sorry.
No, that's okay.
These are just things that pop up as a
Yes,
listing
yes.
agent. Under, where it's, my clients, let's just say, bought the house 3 years ago. They had an inspection. They don't have the inspection. What do I do? Okay? When it says, have you had the house inspected within the last 4 years?
Well, I would say that, I mean, they would have to answer yes, they know that it was inspected.
Well, I understand that, but what if they don't have the
So the fact that they
inspection?
don't have the
They just have to
report,
say, we don't have it.
yeah, I mean, they're gonna have to state we don't have it,
What do
and
you say,
then,
Ruth, on that one?
Well, they probably remember who inspected it.
right,
And you'd have the date of the purchase roughly is when they got it. So you could fill out part of it and just say, don't have copy.
Okay.
okay. Okay, on the contracts, y'all should do a really good job on the contracts. The only thing, I would say that maybe comes back a lot, not a lot, but, be sure to have an executed date. That's, I mean, y'all do a really good job of that, but sometimes I do get them with no executed date. And then on page 9 of the contract, just be sure that all the broker information is filled out. The license supervisor, the license numbers, your license number, all the contact information that has to be on the contract. And then make sure that a selection is made as to who you represent. Especially when there's intermediary, we need to know if it's intermediary or not. Paragraph 22 of the contract, if you have attached to the contract any addendum, then I'm going to be looking for that. So I see contracts sometimes where maybe a lead-based paint addendum is not required because the house was built in 1978 and not prior to 1978, but because maybe the buyer's agent wanted it and it's attached to the contract, it's now a required document. So if it's attached to the contract, it's something I'm going to be looking for, and it also has to be filled out correctly. And the last thing is you can submit your green sheet at any time. You don't have to wait for the compliance process to be you know, to compliance to be met.
2 cents worth on the green sheet.
Yeah.
Guys, the green sheet, what you put on the green sheet is what shows up on your DA. So when you put not my seller and seller information, on the DA it says not my seller. Okay, I'm just saying we're professionals, right? So let's feel, I mean, you have that information, it's in the contract, it's in the lease agreement, so please take the time to put the seller's name or the buyer's name in the green sheet, and it's because we can't change the DA after you do that. If it says not my seller or not my buyer, that's what shows up on the DA. So I'm just giving you a little heads up.
I think even the font too, doesn't it, Mary? Like if you put everything like in all lowercase, it's gonna come out on your DA and all in lowercase. Yeah.
And the key thing to remember, guys, is that the reason we have compliance is because we have E&O insurance, and these are the things that they, that they ask that we do to keep our E&O insurance. And since I've been here, we've been very fortunate every year when we renew our E&O insurance, it's stayed approximately the same. So, this is to help us keep our cost of the $30 and the $15 at a minimum. We don't, if we didn't have this, then, we could be subject to lawsuits and a $5,000, it's $5,000 deductible per transaction or per occurrence. So, if you are working with someone and feel like, or they decide they're going to sue us, you're going to be very thankful that we have a compliance who is being very thorough to cover you, so that you don't have to come out of pocket with all of this expense. And so we just want to try to, it is for your protection.
No, that's all I have. Y'all have any questions about the process or anything?
I guess the only thing, which I talked to Diane about, it has to do with the seller's disclosure. And I guess the tricky part is we need to send it back to them, and buyers and sellers need to mark something and sign initial, but we're technically not supposed to touch it. So it's, what's the best way to get all the information that they missed the first time, now to go in and fill out and not have to keep sitting, like you have 5 things you need done and they only do 3, and they send it back to us.
I know, it's
So
kind of uncomfortable. I will say this, for those of you that use .loop, for some reason, the disclosures that are filled out in .loop, it's like, boy, they just answer. The ones that are filled out by hand, for some reason, they just, I guess your eye just doesn't, maybe misses some things. So a couple of things, I would just maybe educate your seller up front. Look, it's for your protection, please just make sure you've answered every question. If it's, I'll take a look at it, I may have to send it back to you, like tell me you have to send it back, but just let them know, everything needs to be filled out, and it's for their protection. And
can they not add a checkbox onto the seller's disclosure? And they can add a check, so you could add 3, if there's a yes, no, and unknown column, for example, you could add that, you could add the 3 check boxes there and let them choose which one is optional. I mean, the questions have to be answered, so your choice is either do it that way or have them redo the entire thing.
So even if they're hand filled out, when you have the ones in there, we get hit back, then we need to do it through .loop. You said go ahead and add all those boxes. We're not technically touching it then.
No.
And their things, so
Right,
send it there and then send it off to the other person.
Yes.
And you can even tell them, look, after you've signed all your listing documents, we've got a compliance office, my broker's gonna be looking at these, and we're just gonna make sure that we've crossed all of our T's and dotted all of our I's. And that's for your client's benefit as well.
Is it a good idea to put your clients, at least their last name in the name of the loop?
I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I know that.
There's nothing wrong with that, but we don't search anything about your client's last name.
Yeah.
I know, but we do, as agents.
Yeah.
Because I don't remember addresses, but I'll remember my client's name.
Right. So, you
So if I'm doing a
address
search and it's in the name of the loop, I
yes.
can search for it that way and find them.
Yeah, I don't think there's anything wrong
The
with
other
that.
thing, if you have a listing that you have to come up year after year, like in pieces,
Yes.
I learned to put the date in there and archive the old one because I have messed that up.
Because how many 12,500 mail bills?
Oh, my
do we
Lord.
have?
So it's really good. I know. But the address, put the buyer's name or seller's name in parentheses and the date, you know, like lead.
And the more information y'all fill out on that,
It helps.
it truly does help. I mean, even when we're posting the money and looking at mystery money, I mean, every little bit helps.
Okay, so Allison, did I answer your question that you sent on the email? Okay, okay. All right, well, thank y'all. Feel free to email me any questions or, text me, email me.
She'll be around afterwards if we're too shy to ask her questions. Don't talk to her. Ruth, do you want to go over your items?
Okay, so we have one marketing tip and then we have advertising tips. How many of you heard the term, your listings, your leads?
Yes.
Right? So what does that mean?
Means you should get your leads off the list.
Okay, it means when we share data with all these people out in the world, all these different portals, that if a lead comes to you about your listing, Keller Williams has executed contracts so that those leads come back to you. Now, there's a trick on Zillow, and Brian and I looked at this yesterday. What was the address of that house?
3 Mason Pond.
Oh, Mason, I said Morgan. Okay.
Yeah.
No, yes.
Yes.
Okay, sorry. Oh, you did your Zillow profile.
No, I didn't.
Somebody did, because yesterday, what did this look like? It was just a white box, right?
Yeah, oh, well, she may have put the, well, she said she saw it. She may have put the picture in there, but check the data, just to be sure.
I click on
Be
it.
sure it's got the address and all the other stuff.
Okay, so let's talk about what happens here. Okay? Okay, go back, let me show you something. If you're just a little white box here, it's your listing, but can't tell anything about you, guess what they're gonna do? And see what that says, contact Premier Agent, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Guess who that lead goes to?
Somebody else.
Somebody that has paid Zillow money,
Oh,
right?
because that's what you think you do, and you think you're getting him.
Yeah,
Yeah,
but
you
you're
can-
not. So that's why you want your,
His name.
is that your picture, Brian?
Yes, it's a bald guy, yeah.
Yeah, okay. Anyway.
You see any bald guy.
Okay, so we're going to send out this piece of paper to you after the meeting today, and it's going to have the link in it for you to go to Zillow, create your free profile. You don't have to pay them, and then it's going to have a link to go to Trulia to do your free profile. That's a tongue twister.
You know, that is a little tricky.
It is
Yeah,
tricky.
because
If
you
you
would
look at it, I would still think, if it was me, I would
contact
still
agent.
go down and go, oh, he's a Premier Agent, let me go pull him up.
I know. It's,
Or I would click on that contact agent.
I
that's
agree.
big.
And well, let me just say, this is a new feature that Keller Williams negotiated for us in February of this year. Prior to that, it didn't matter. If you were the listing agent, your photo and your information wasn't on there at all. And if you were with another company, it still wouldn't be on there at all. But Keller Williams was able to negotiate that with Trulia and with Zillow, so that your name is listed as the listing agent regardless of who paid for the money to be a Premier Agent. The agreement that they reached was the Premier Agent is still there, because if the potential buyer that's interested in that listing feels that they want representation from a buyer's agent and not the listing agent, they have that opportunity. So that's kind of why they came to that decision. But this might not be the best alternative, but it's way better than it was a year ago this time.
well, and see, you can see a link here. If you click on that, you can see that that's a link. So there is that. You can see the little line around it. Okay, the other thing you need to be very aware of is that Big Brother, AKA the Real Estate Commission, is looking at your online presence. So the only rules I could find about online advertising are back from 2014. In my owner's phone call a couple weeks ago, they had Avis Wupash, who's the chair of TRAC, talking to us about what they're gonna be looking at. I'm telling you, it's Facebook, it's Twitter, it's anything online, so you better be sure that you advertise appropriately. So here are the rules right now. They're gonna be looking at the rules again this year, but right now, this is what you better be doing, okay? So we'll send that out to you, because we don't want them talking to you about that, okay? All right, that's it.